But the closer kind of definition is EU 27, so the 27 member states of the EU. Over the last couple of years, it has really grown, the number, from 18, 20, then 24, and finally a couple of years ago to 27, with Romania and Bulgaria joining. And you see it's quite a difference in terms of total population. Largest country is Germany, more than 80, so 80 million people, roughly 1/4 of the US population of 300. And then you have countries like Malta and Cyprus that are very small, right? But it's quite a large, political and European and economic union. 28% share of the GDP, or gross world product, not domestic product, gross world product, and then a 500 million population. And by the way, I talked about the 47 countries, the EU 27, and then there are 16 countries that share the euro. So sometimes when people talk about Europe, they now think about euro only. That's 16 countries sharing the same currency. When you talk about medical devices, the EU 27 is what people oftentimes refer to because of the common regulatory pathway, CE marking process. So looking at the global market, US, the dominant market in terms of sales, a couple of years ago, 42% compared to 34% in Europe. And then you see the breakdown in Europe. Essentially, you have 4 large markets, and this is shown here in greater detail. Italy, UK, France, Germany, roughly 2/3 of the total European market. So those are key markets. When you look at the European Medtech industry, it's fairly comparable to the US in that you have a lot of innovation coming from small companies. It's a big employer in terms of industries. When you look at overall Europe, it's more than 500,000 employees in Medtech. Many small companies, as I mentioned, high R&D spending, short life cycles, even shorter in cases, shorter than the US because of a less stringent regulatory environment. And when you see the total sales, you see the figures of 72 billion euros compared to roughly 100 billion in the US. Again, these are data from 3-4 years ago, the latest we could currently find. But compare that to China and Brazil at 3 billion, right? It's still quite a difference, despite of the growth in markets like China and the growth or the high absolute number of population. This slide actually speaks to the fact that I mentioned that there's a significant number of small companies. The UK actually, in terms of this percentage, in terms of number of companies, is quite large, 20%. In Germany, you also have many small companies, but also a couple of very large companies like Siemens, for example. So therefore, it's a smaller percentage in terms of number of companies. And you see Spain, France, and then the others following. This slide shows you the total imports and exports of Medtech. And you see in terms of export, there are 4 large countries or important countries. You have Germany, France, the UK, and then Ireland. And Ireland, despite of its 6 million population, you can see has a tremendous output in terms of Medtech. And the reason is that most US companies now have production facilities in Ireland, partly because of taxes, but partly because Ireland was very active in actually bringing Medtech companies to the country. And so therefore, Ireland is an important player in terms of Medtech production and increasingly also R&D in Medtech. And you see the imports in terms of kind of size of the import markets of the various countries, but you see again the 4 major countries being of significant importance, and then it's kind of trickling down.